I'm back.
I'm
I'm back.
happened.
It,
We all got kicked.
we got a notice that said the meeting has ended.
I know. I got the same notice. We'll try to start this again. So we'll give everybody time to get back on. There were 28 people at that point, so now we got 21 on. I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay.
Okay, are we on?
Like it.
Are we back?
I'm back.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody didn't like the fact that the league registered 180 people in the month of September. And they just decided to get rid of us. Okay, so anyway, that is wonderful work. Now, just so you know, deadline for voter registration is Monday, October 5th. Encourage anyone you know to go register. If you're going to vote absentee, get your ballot as soon as possible, to apply, get it done today.
Thank you.
Ballot next week. And that's extremely important because don't wait till the deadline, which is October 27th. Your vote will not be counted. Early voting starts October 14th and will run to October 29th. If you want to vote in person, mask up and vote early. That seems to be pretty effective and pretty safe in Nashville, in Davidson County for sure. Okay, next month, our hot topic will be on November 6th, 3 days after the election. And we probably will not know what happened yet. But our speaker, thanks to Ethel and her hard work, is going to be Lynn Hetty, who is of Braver Angels. That used to be Better Angels, but they changed their name. And she is going to, she represents an organization that seeks to reduce the polarization of Americans by helping them learn to
We'll see.
Madeline, you're muted.
You never heard anything, right?
No.
Right.
All right. Basically, voter registration ends October 5th, which is next Tuesday. Encourage everyone you know to vote. If you're going to vote absentee, do it today. Get your application in, and as soon as the ballot gets in, send it back. Early voting starts October 14th to October 29th, and mask up and vote early. And next month, our hot topic is going to be on November 6th, 3 days after the election. We may still not know, we may be uncomfortable about that. Lynn Hetty of Braver Angels, formerly Better Angels, but now Braver Angels, is going to be our presenter. Braver Angels is an organization that seeks to reduce polarization of America by getting people together to kind of learn how to talk, listen to each other, and better understand each other. And so we're looking forward to that. Thanks to Ethel and all your work. And finally, I will turn you over to Carol.
Thank you. I need somebody to tell me if I'm up or not because I'm not showing up on my own thing. Am I up? Okay, thank you. Like many, Kay's path was impacted by the place that she grew up, the neighborhood she grew up in, the people that she knew. Her passion lies in working with communities to help ensure families and children to have a safe, secure place to call home. She grew up in Little Rock, went to undergraduate school in Little Rock, and then worked on certificates and advanced degrees from Duke and Harvard. She also holds her credentials from the National Development Council of Neighborhood Works America. Early on, she recognized the link between a child's ability to succeed in school and the housing and the community that she's in. She sees the dramatic impact that families have on a child, particularly as that child is growing up. This impact is transformational and it's generational. Kay recently retired as the executive director of New Level Community Development Program here in Nashville, where she served for 14 years. But if you think she's retired, you have another thought coming. I don't think this woman is capable of really retiring from much of anything. She came here from Nashville, where she was the executive director of the Blount County, Tennessee Habitat for Humanity, and then went on to found the partnership organization Foothills Community Development, where she served as executive director. She is a founding board member of the Tennessee Affordable Housing Commission. She's worked with other colleagues across the state to create housing counselors and educators of Tennessee. She's a member of the Nashville Rotary Club, Third National Bank's National Community Advisory Board. And with all of that, all I can say is I have worked personally with her and I find her amazing. And so I will turn it over to Kay. And as we go along, this is going to be very much a question answer. So each of our speakers will speak for about 10, 15 minutes. And then at the end of each person's talk, we'll have a Q&A. And both of our speakers will respond to the Q&A.
Actually, Mother,
Yeah.
Kay and I wanted to speak back to back and then open it up to a Q&A.
That is
after.
absolutely fine. I'm sorry. So if people just write their questions as we move along in the chat board, that would be great.
And
Thank you.
just a reason why we wanted to choose that format with so much Q&A is that in the topic of affordable housing, there are a lot of questions that come up. There's a lot of terminology that Kay and I will use. And at any point in time, if we do say something that you don't understand, please feel free to stop us and ask questions. And our goal was to kind of do a brief overview of what affordable housing is and some of the challenges, and then to let you guys ask as much questioning as you need to.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thanks, Michael. It's great to see you, kind of, sort of, from a distance. And I see some other familiar names and faces on here, so it's good to be here with you all. Can everybody see this? I have a PowerPoint up. Can people see it?
Housing Nashvillians, yes.
Okay. I wanted to try to give some context for our discussion. I thought that was important. So I'm going to start out. It's not a long PowerPoint. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I thought it was important just to get into some terminology you might hear Michael and myself use, and then give you some basic facts that I think is important for people to know around this issue. So there are affordability measures, and there's a standard definition of what we all believe is affordable, that folks are paying no more than 30% of their income on all housing costs, not just rent or mortgage, but that also includes utilities. And then the federal government uses a measure for evaluating affordability called the Area Median Income, or AMI. And then to make it more complicated, the federal government established for our area 10-county metropolitan statistical area, which includes Williamson County. So that skews our numbers, but the area median income for our 10-county area is $82,300. But if you look at Davidson County and just look at our income, the median income, which is in the middle, half the people make more than that, half the people make less than that. That's $56,507. So you can see there's a difference of over $25,000 there. So that's important to remember. You might hear us use the term affordable and workforce. So for government funding purposes, this is primarily federal and state funding purposes. Affordable housing is housing that an individual earning 80% or less of the area median income can afford without being cost burdened, meaning they're not paying more than 30% of their monthly income on rent. So in our area, 80% of the area median income for a family of four is about $64,000. It's established by the number of people in the household. And then it goes down from there. For a 3-person household, it's $57,600. And for a 2-person household, it's $51,200. And for a 1-person household, it's $44,800. And then when you hear the term workforce housing, that's typically housing for individuals whose income is higher than that 80% number. And again, for our area, that can go up to $96,000 for a 4-person household. So with the people we serve, we have to collect income information from all events. So we have to show the government that we're serving people in one of these 2 categories. So let's look at real numbers in Nashville. And these are important numbers. So I may sit on this just a second so it can sink in. You see that in Davidson County, you see our median household income is a little over $56,000. We have 305,849 housing units. So of those units, a little over half are owner occupied and a little under half are renter occupied. And this comes from an annual survey called the American Community Survey. Now let's look at cost burden, and this is really important. That means you're paying more than 30% of your income for rent. 23% of our owners are cost burden, but 46% of our renters are cost burden. This is an important number to remember. That's a whole lot of people, folks. Almost 59,000 households. And then of those households with children, 21.4% unfortunately live under poverty. So let's look at our workers and what our workers are earning. And this data comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the latest year that I have, which is 2019. So you can see in 2019, they said the median worker earners, again, that's half the people make more than that, half the people make less than that, or almost $39,000 a year. So an affordable rent at that wage would be about $965 a month. But then if you look at what the median rent is in Nashville, and there are lots of research sites you can go and find that, the latest numbers that I came up with for a 1-bedroom is $1,297, and then $1,445 for a 2-bedroom. So you can see this medium wage worker is already cost burden. But what's really, really important to know is that 31 of the top 50 jobs in Nashville don't pay enough to afford the fair market rent, which is about a little over $1,000 for just a basic, simple apartment, not anything fancy or in a fancy place. It's just a basic apartment. And since the recession, you may or may not know, those of you that keep up with this data may know, that the majority of the jobs that have been created nationwide and including Nashville have been jobs in the lower wage industry sectors. So that's a challenge. So how does this affect our families and our kids? It puts a lot of stress on them. In Nashville, a chamber report shared that over 55% of our students are moving 3 times or more a year. And then 2019 data showed that between 3,500 and 4,000 students experience homelessness. So there's an acronym called ACE, Acute Childhood Experiences. And ACE is a condition that when children experience stressful experience over time, it affects their ability to learn, it affects their brain. And they can do brain studies and their brains look different. If you look at a picture of a brain of a child that's having these sorts of things over time, the colors look different, they show up differently. And we know that that impacts a kid's ability to learn in school. Housing stability is not just important, it's essential for kids to succeed in school. And then we know that when they succeed in school, that equals opportunities and economic mobility. And when they don't succeed in school, we know that their earning opportunities are less, they struggle, they may end up in the school to prison pipeline, bad things happen. So do people really care about this? Well, actually, a national opinion poll, which was taken in 2019 by a national research organization, showed that 91% of the people surveyed said that stable, affordable housing is one of the most important things that affects people's security. 76% believe that our current generations find it harder for people to find stable housing, and 73% of Republicans and 95% of Democrats believe it should be a top priority and our government should be investing in it. It's a domino effect. So if we look in Nashville, and Michael will get into some of this, if you compare Nashville to other cities, even peer cities, and study the other cities, you see that we have real tools missing from the toolbox. We need a Metro Department of Housing with civil servants, not political appointees, with senior executive staff that has authority to make decisions, that understands housing systems, policies, programs, and how they fit together. In Nashville, around the housing arena, we have a lot of pistons going up and down, but there's no network, no connection. And when we're in front of the public, like you all, they'll say, well, how many units are being produced? Where do we stand? Well, we don't have a coordinated housing system, so we need a system to really make this work. We need a 10-year funding and implementation plan. We have a trust fund, but it's woefully underfunded and to meet the need and increasing need. A community social impact fund is a fund that investors invest monies in and take a little lower return in order to do good in the community. And then we need accountability and transparency. And why do we need these things? Well, we have a severe deficit of affordable housing. In a 2017 report showed that we were 18,000 units short, and by 2025, we're gonna be at 32,000 units. So that's concerning. And these are just quotes I like to kind of close statements out with. The fact is, if someone doesn't have a pillow to lay their head on at night, or a blanket to keep them warm, or a roof over their head, then every other issue in life is just really, really hard to deal with. Some of us call that housing first. You got to start there. And then Harvard has been studying the same group of people for over 30 years. They started looking at them when they were kids, and they've done all this research, and they have the data is there that shows that our children do best in stable households where they know what to expect, where they feel safe and secure, and they grow up and they have greater opportunities and earn tens and tens of thousands of dollars more than they would have otherwise. So I'm going to stop there and throw the football to Michael and let him get into some things. And just to let you know, Michael and I have partnered on projects together. The latest one, he was a developer and we were the nonprofit partner, and we were able to help some families become homeowners when they wouldn't otherwise, with help that we brought to them. And one particular guy sticks in my mind. He was a firefighter, and his income was, guess what? $38,000 a year. So Michael and his company integrated these townhomes into a project they're doing in West Nashville. We brought Housing Trust Fund money to the table to reduce the cost, and then he still wasn't going to quite make it. So guess what? We went out and found another $15,000 to help him get into that home. So we know we have one national firefighter living inside our urban core. So I'm going to toss it to you, Michael.
A couple of teachers too, from what I understand.
Yes, we got several teachers, and so that makes it good.
I'm actually going to break in at this point because I did not introduce Michael. And as you probably figured out, Michael is in fact my son. Aside from the fact that Michael is my son, after he got out of the military in Seattle, he started a real estate career, and then the real estate bubble burst. And he decided it was time to come back home to Nashville. And once he got here, he began developing a new company called MiKen Development. And his focus from the beginning was to make housing that was less pricey. And the other thing that I've always been incredibly proud about is that he goes into industrial sites and has the sites rezoned as residential, cleans up whatever brown space is there, and then builds houses that can allow people like the firefighter and teachers to find a home. He has been a tireless advocate and a local expert on affordable housing policy in Tennessee. He's worked with the state legislature to get state legislation passed. He's involved with projects throughout the Southeast. But most of all, he's been a developer with a highly neighborhood-centric philosophy on development. He founded a group called Tactical Urbanism Forum, and in partnership with the Civic Design Center, they have done some wonderful projects on thoroughfares to make things change. A good example of this is what he did on 51st Avenue after, you may remember, after the sewers exploded, when the truck with petroleum went into the sewers. Well, they now have laws on 51st that change the whole way that operates. Compliments of Michael and his group to get neighbors to work together to bring about change. He lives in his community where he works, and he leads grassroots efforts in communities to help them navigate the rapid process of redevelopment that's happening all over Nashville, and has worked with groups, not only ones where he's developing, but groups that he isn't developing, but just because he sees a need there. So it's with a lot of pride that I introduce to you my son, who I love dearly. Okay, Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mother. I appreciate the intro. I did not do a PowerPoint for this one because I figured it would be better for me to just kind of break down affordable housing for people. I think, you know, a lot of people think about affordable housing, but they don't really understand how many facets that is. And it's a very broad conversation to say, oh, well, let's talk about affordable housing because there's different levels of affordable developers. You know, if you look at affordable housing developers, you've got for-profit developers and you have nonprofit developers. I am what you would call a mission-oriented for-profit developer. Kate with New Level CDC was a community development corporation. So she was a nonprofit developer. You know, so for me, I have investors, and at the end of the day, I have a bottom line, and I have to make a certain rate of return for my investors, and that's kind of the way that things work. For Kate, a lot of the funding is grant funding based. A lot of the times, you know, they're trying to create houses for people at a certain level of income, and so. There's kind of two different ways that you know, the nonprofits and for-profit developers, and the other developer that you can also count is the government here in Nashville. That would be MDHA. At a state level, THDA actually doesn't develop any of their own housing, nor do they own any. They use a funding mechanism I'll talk about in just a second. But so essentially, under the for-profit and nonprofit developers, you have two different kinds of housing. You have for sale housing, and then you have for rent housing. And for sale housing, there are very limited things that you can use in order to create for sale housing that's truly affordable. As a developer, I can go out and I can build, you know, a 1,000 square foot house in the Nations that I sell for $250,000. Now I have created an affordable unit, but that doesn't mean that is actually like a true definition of affordable housing, because what that is that's temporary affordability, because that unit that sold for $250,000 in 2014 will now be selling for $315,000 to $350,000. So to truly make a affordable housing unit at a for sale level, you have to use the master deed that's created at the point of sale, and you have to put in a mechanism there. Now, Kate and I, what we did was what's called a shared equity program. And that was done with funding from the Barnes Fund. We were the first round of for sale funding from the Barnes Fund. And we did it as a program where essentially we income qualify the buyers. And then after we've income qualified the buyers, Metro then funds the difference for the affordable housing unit. And we also look for other funds like Kate was talking about. Now there's another way that we can do deed restrictions as well. And that's if I work with something called a CDFI. A CDFI is a commercial development financial institution, and that is a nonprofit bank. We have one here in Nashville. It's called the Housing Fund. And CDFI specifically will take a second lien position to a project to where they're not securitized and lend money to it if you agree to do some portion as affordable. And so through money from the CDFI, I'm doing another deed restriction where it's for a 5-year period, and we're specifically qualifying people of color that are in positions like teachers and firefighters and it rolls off at 5 years, and they're able to sell that unit and get all of the equity that we have deferred in that unit at that point in time, plus whatever equity has been created in the market in that unit. And the reason why we've done that is because of there's a lot of talk, especially right now with everything going on in America, on how African-American populations have been redlined and have not allowed the equity of real estate to build up their family wealth. Well, if you could imagine being able to give someone, you know, $150,000 in equity after 5 years in a house because of a loan program, and you can create generational wealth instantly for that individual, then that's a great way to kind of juice up, you know, an individual for an equity position for the rest of their life. So there's a few different models on the for sale side that we try to go after. The model is great. It makes sure that the units stay affordable for a period of, I do believe, 25 years. The other model is really good for creating some good, generational wealth. And then you go into the for rent, where there are a lot of tools and mechanisms. If you guys have not noticed, we have had more sky cranes per capita than any city in the US here in Nashville. We've got apartments all over the place. And we really have just dropped the ball as far as ways that we could incentivize developers that are building all these high-rise and mid-rise apartment buildings to really do affordable housing. And so at a state level, just starting there, THDA does not handle any housing, but THDA does handle something called LIHTC. LIHTC is low-income housing tax credits. And there's two forms of LIHTC. There's a 4%, which is non-competitive, which basically you apply for it, you get it. And then there's a 9%, and that's 4% of your project is what the 4% funds, 9% is what the 9% funds. And 9% is competitive, but the way they did it here in Tennessee is you have to have a minimum of 3 projects that you've done before you can apply for a LIHTC grant. And then they score it so that if you do a mixed income community, you're scored less than concentrating poverty, which we've all realized is really, really bad. And they also incentivize rural districts getting more money than the urban cores, which we realize is where the growth is happening. So our state funding mechanism of LIHTC does not work very well. And then the state tax assessor also decided to tax LIHTC. And so MDHA has done something called a pilot program, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, where developers who have received low-income housing tax credits can then give their property to MDHA so that they're not paying taxes on the tax credits, because we live in Tennessee and we do things a little backwards here sometimes. So that's kind of talking through the financial mechanisms. Now there's another way to do a pilot, and that's kind of one of the things that I really like to talk about today. And if I've lost anybody so far, please let me know. If you want to save your questions for the end, that's fine. But we can also do a pilot through the Industrial Development Board here in Nashville. And it turns out that there's state legislation that's available where we could actually go and do this right now with any project if we wanted to. And so Memphis does it, Chattanooga does it, Knoxville does it. I have proposed for us to do it. I have been trying to push this conversation, and I have Berkeley Allen that's working with it, and hopefully we will finally get it done after about 2 years. But it's going to take a lot of political will because it's done council district by council district. But basically what it is that it's a payment in lieu of taxes. So I take a building that I build, a brand new one, and then I turn it over to the Industrial Development Board where they then own it. So therefore I pay no taxes on it. And so what that does is that creates a certain percentage of my building as affordable, and then it's done on a contract of 15 to 20 years, depending on what the city sets up. And so that we're able to structure this kind of however we want because it's done through the IDB, it's not done through MDHA, and the state legislation is pretty flexible on it. So outside of those programs, the only other thing we have is a city piece of legislation that I wrote called the Housing Incentive Pilot Program, which is Nashville's way of doing a pilot program as well. Essentially, it's a tax rebate that you get back, but it's done on an annual basis. So that's kind of that's kind of where we're at as far as mechanisms. So I will create a page for this information and try to give links for as much of it as possible. I know this is pretty dense and thick, so I'll do a follow-up. I just saw that pop up in the chat. But yeah, so that's affordable housing in a nutshell in Nashville. And as a for-profit private developer, I have written pieces of affordable housing legislation. I'm trying to push this pilot program through the IDB through. I have done everything except for take the federal funding route. And the reason why is because I only focus on 80% of AMI to 120%. LIHTC is geared towards 80% down to 0%. And once you get, below 60% of AMI, there's a lot of services that Kate can talk about that come with that. And so as a private developer, there's only so much I can do. So that is the very, very fast elevator pitch on affordable housing. And I'm sure there should be some great questions. So I'll turn it over.
What impact is the COVID virus having on housing in Nashville?
I can,
So from a for sale standpoint, we're in a boom right now. Everything that I have that is for sale, that is standalone housing, has contracts before we have cabinets in, because everybody wants to get out of large apartments where they touch the same doorknob as 300 people and kind of get their own space. I think people quarantining in a 600 square foot box for the last 8 months are really ready to take advantage of the low interest rates. So that's what I'm seeing.
on the individual and family side, there's a national website you can go to, and it gives you up-to-date data for different states and what's happening with the impact of the virus, both on people's health, but also on their economic condition. And so we know from the latest data that over 30% of Tennesseans have not been able to pay their recent month's rent or are behind. We have, and we know that's growing. The Equity Alliance is another nonprofit here in town that was asked to conduct a community needs assessment by the mayor's office to determine where the needs are. Even though we kept saying, we're hearing from people that have these pressures, they're not able to pay their rent or their mortgage, and they're getting behind. So the Community Needs Alliance conducted this study with a big PR firm, and again, they came up with people's statements of their number one need is for help with housing cost. We also know with what we call congregant living, which would be living in like the Nashville Rescue Mission sites, or group homes, juvenile detention centers, things like that, that's had an impact on people's health, and cases of COVID-19 have really gone up. So the virus is having a significant impact. Yesterday, there was a statewide summit that lasted most of the day because people are concerned about, and it was around eviction and eviction prevention. Because when someone loses their housing, then they go and try to find another place to live, and many times it's bunked up with other households. And we know that's the worst thing that can happen when you're trying to protect people's health. So there are groups statewide that are looking at this. One of the things that on the advocacy side, we were able to have some success in Nashville was in persuading, along with groups like the Equity Alliance, Metro Nashville government to set aside $10 million of their CARES Act funding to be used for rent and mortgage help. And United Way administers this money. And so they have a group of nonprofits that they're working with. The calls came in so fast, so quickly, that one nonprofit called NeedLink, its application site was up in the morning and they had to shut it down by the afternoon because they don't have the capacity as an organization to process that many applications at one time. So housing and the pandemic are connected. And there are real concerns about that. A lot of people focusing on that. So I think of that $10 million that was allocated that the United Way administers, about half of it has gone out to nonprofits. Now they're trying to work people through the system and the process to do the due diligence and then get the money to help pay their rent. Because the CDC, Centers for Disease Control's eviction moratorium, which they said is in effect until December 31st, which says that landlords can evict tenants for non-payment of rent. But the burden of proof, the tenant has to submit a declaration. And so landlords are choosing to ignore that or work around that. The courts are having a real challenge, the housing attorneys. So they're trying to build an army of housing attorneys to help in that arena to try to help people stay in their homes.
Well, and even the backlog of evictions, if you look at every place we have a moratorium, all these landlords are still able to file the paperwork. So you've got essentially what you call a logjam, where you've got all these evictions that have been filed and they are sitting waiting to be heard by the courts. So as soon as that floodgate is open, that's dramatically going to affect the rental market and the homelessness epidemic in America.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another question that, are there states and cities that you think are doing better jobs in Nashville supporting affordable housing as far as incentives and government entities? I would say yes. There are a lot of that you can look at that are doing a much better job than Nashville. Denver, Seattle, New York. Let's see, I was just in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Nashville. LA, for instance, a CDC, a Community Development Corporation, like what Kate was involved with in the California area, wouldn't touch a project under $100 million. In Nashville, you won't see a CDC that has a project probably above 10 million usually. There might be one or two that have the capacity to take that on, but that's it. So that kind of shows you from that perspective, from the nonprofit perspective, that Nashville has done a really horrible job of beefing up and funding their CDC capacity, their nonprofit development capacity. And so the only way for them to kind of fill the gap is to turn to for-profit developers and help us incentivize things. So I passed a fast-track permit law with Berkeley Allen, but unfortunately nobody knows about it. And so there's two things. A, you can write whatever laws you want to, but if the mayor's office and the planning department don't go and tell all the developers, hey, if you do affordable housing, you can get all your sign-offs and all your permits up to the front of the queue, or you can get your U&O, which is your finals at the end of the process. You can get those bumped to the front of the queue, which from a development standpoint, that saves me months off my timeline, and that's money. And so there's a lot of things that are available that people don't know about, and then there's a lot of things that Nashville could do and we're just not doing. Denver would be a great one to look at. Basically, they've got a bunch of different funding programs. They also have a really big community land trust. We have a community land trust here that Kate and I are involved with. That's done under the CDFI, which is the housing fund, which is in the Gulch. And those guys basically were given a bunch of back tax properties for Metro. But if you look at the list of back tax properties, they're properties I would never touch as a developer. And most of the nonprofits, are trying to get these lots, but they're really bad lots and they're not going to make a difference. So it's kind of interesting because Nashville talks a big game about wanting to do all these things for affordable housing, but when the rubber meets the road, there's not a lot of traction.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the best cities in terms of benchmarking that we found is San Antonio. And they really, and the effort had a champion. And in that city, the champion happened to be the mayor at that point in time in 2018. So he established a affordable housing committee, which then went to work and set up a policy framework. And it was a very inclusive effort of a lot of stakeholders in the community, but it also was very, very specific in what they ended up with. And so there are metrics, goals, objectives, timelines, who does what systems, and the effort, it's a 10-year plan with about, they're trying to create 26,000 units over 10 years and for about $2 billion. And it's leveraged you leverage every dollar of government money. Typically in our world, we're able to leverage sometimes 5 to 1, at least 3 to 1. So for every dollar of investment, we can go and get, you know, 3 or 4, sometimes $5 to leverage with that. So if we had an affordable housing trust fund generating with a funding stream to bring $30 million a year, we're going to leverage that up to 100 million or so. We just know how to do that with bank lending and other sorts of financing. We know how to go get the other financing pieces. But cities like Nashville has not had its first affordable housing plan. Cities like Salt Lake and Denver and Seattle, you know, they're on their 3rd, 4th plan. And we're trying to get the first one started.
Seattle just passed the memorandum for it was a tax vote basically to increase your property tax, but it was specifically for affordable housing, and so everyone got to vote, and they said, okay, well, you know, for every $100,000, they'll go up 2 cents, but this will create, you know, X amount of units, and it was really cool the way they did it. You know, Nashville hasn't even, you know, we can't even get past the property tax issue here and get everybody on board without kind of cramming it through. But we've never tried to initiate a ballot process like that. And we've never gone to the public and asked them, would they be willing to put a portion of their property taxes towards affordable housing? And I think that's part of that's part of the issue, is that there's not a lot of dialogue around affordable housing coming from the mayor's office. You have a few experts at council that know enough about affordable housing to be dangerous, but you don't have an office of affordable housing at the mayor's office where you have some person who's a guru who knows everything they need to know about affordable housing, who is kind of heading this up. And every developer who comes to Nashville and says, hey, I want to do a project, they sit down with that guy who can go, okay, well, these are all the things you can do for affordable housing. Like, if Nashville really wanted to make affordable housing a priority, they would funnel and mainstream every development through an office of affordable housing to try and push people to do that. And they don't. And somebody asked here if there is a plan. It seems like everything is out of control. What role does planning department play? So there is a plan. The planning department wrote this thing called Nashville Next. There's a lot of community input into it, but it does not address affordable housing. It addresses the need for affordable housing, but it does not put specific metrics to how much affordable housing we have to create, when will we create it. It doesn't define any of that. What it defines is kind of the form and the context and the density and the zoning that you're allowed to do in certain areas and what you're allowed to build. And it doesn't even really define that, because a lot of times Nashville Next doesn't actually match the zoning code for the street that it talks about. So you've got a few issues there. Planning does not talk to codes very well. Most departments are fairly siloed. So, you know, a lot of these entities don't interact. Just getting that process of getting my affordable housing project certified by the mayor's office so that my permits could be fast tracked. After we created that program, I was the first person to bring it to Bill Herbert and say, listen, like, here's one that's certified. And he was, I don't know what to do with this. And I was like, I mean, you guys implemented this 6 months ago. You didn't think this was going to happen? And he's like, Mike, you're the first guy to put this in front of me. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to figure out how to make this happen. And this is just we're going to need to figure this out. So that's been kind of what we realized, is that if you want to make something happen in affordable housing, you have to go out and make it happen. You can't rely on council. You can't rely on anybody else. You need political will and good organizing around it.
Yeah, we need, you know, advocacy and organizing is really critical, and really fundamentally, maybe Nashville's a city that's trying to catch up with itself, or maybe it doesn't realize it needs to catch up with itself. But we lack capacity in terms of systems and infrastructure and expertise. We have a lot of pistons going up and down, but they're not, but they're not connected. And Metro Council now has an affordable housing committee, but our observation is, after watching them and talking to them, is that they're pushed in positions of being reactive as opposed to proactive. And they'll think in terms of tactics, but not in terms of what do we need in Nashville? What are the pieces we need, the framework and the systems to really, to really significantly impact our housing challenges. So bringing together a movement of voices around that is my dream.
For me, I'm a person of action. For those of you who that's probably not surprising, but I don't like to talk about it. I like to be about it, and I like to do it. And it gets very frustrating because we've been talking about affordable housing for 7 years. Kate and I have together, and we have probably moved the needle maybe 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch in the 7 years, and we've proposed probably 5 or 6 yards of movement in that 7 years. So you can imagine you're butting your head against the proverbial wall and watching pieces of sand fall out. That's the way I would explain trying to be an advocate for affordable housing.
What would both of you suggest we do as the league to support affordable housing in Nashville?
I would write your local council person and tell them that you heard about a new technique called a pilot through the IDB, and you want to know what's going on with it. You want to see how you can support it, and you want to make sure that this tool comes to fruition, because this reroutes developers around MDHA, and this is something that can be done district by district with your council person. So it's a way that you can create affordable housing in your area and have a say about how it goes down.
And what does IDBA stand for?
IDB is the Industrial Development Board.
It's one of those government boards that we have. We also have a health and education board, and along with this industrial development board. And really those boards have a lot more authority than we realize, and a lot of stuff happens. It's interesting.
When Bridgestone got $50 million and when Bridgestone got $50 million in TIF, they did that through the IDB.
TIF being
tax increment financing. It's a loan. Yeah. They got a loan, and the loan was paid back through future property taxes. So the other, I think the other action that you all could take is to communicate with the current administration Mayor Cooper, he does have a lot on his plate. In his platform, when he ran, he committed to getting a 10-year affordable housing plan done. We haven't made any progress on that yet, but let him know that that's important to you. Also, like Michael said, communicate with your council members and let them know. It seems like we have disjointed activities in Nashville around trying to meet our housing needs. You know, what's their plan to come forward with a mechanism to really make a significant impact?
The other thing I would say is that if you're in a developing neighborhood or, you know, you have a son or a daughter in a developing neighborhood, like Buena Vista Heights or, you know, Salem Town or something, you know, any neighborhood that's still developing, if they are involved with their neighborhood organization, that neighborhood organization has the power to negotiate with developers and insist that they do affordable housing and mandate that they do it as part of that negotiation. So like when a developer asks for a rezone, a community can go, we can do that, but we want you to enroll in this pilot program that they're working on, or this housing incentive pilot program, whichever incentive program we can do. If the neighborhoods start asking and demanding affordable housing and switch from having a NIMBY kind of point of view towards affordable housing to having a let's mandate it kind of a view towards affordable housing, that would be a dramatic shift in the conversation with the developer. And I think that would help dramatically to create affordable housing.
Okay, Michael, our time is up. Both of you have done a wonderful job explaining parts and pieces about a process that we all are aware of, but not particularly knowledgeable in. So I thank you both very, very much. And a final reminder that our upcoming program that is going to be, rats, I just did blank, Better Angels, no longer Better Angels, now the, what is it? Somebody besides me.
Braver Angels.
Braver Angels. There we go. Thank you.
6.
It's November 6th. And I think this, if there's ever a time in our country where we need to look at how one becomes a braver angel, this may be the time. So with that, happy voting. Good luck and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.